All right, good evening, Adrian, and welcome to this week's episode of Appalachian State Housing 101.
Hey, Zach, how are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here with you to talk a little bit about what does it mean to live in a community. A lot of our students joining us likely don't live at home on halls of 30 people or in buildings of 300, and as you and I both know, that's a huge change.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, I can remember when moved into college. Come from a home where I have a younger sister, so we always had our own rooms. And suddenly I had two roommates I was on a top bunk in a bed. Total shock for me coming in, which I can think a lot of our students can identify with, having to relearn how to share things and live in community all together. But I don't know if everyone knows what community really means when they come to App State and housing. So when I think of community, I think of a commonality, a sharing of a space, and sharing how that space will operate with you in it. So with your neighbors in the hall, with your new roommates or your suite mates, how will you all function? What things will you agree upon? How will you disagree? All those things will make up your community once you get here as a student.
Yeah, or what do you care about? Like, I remember when I lived on the hall, I didn't know that, like, I cannot sleep when I'm hot. Like, that sounds silly, but I used to have temperature control at my house. And then I lived with someone who was from Texas, and I went to college in Virginia. So what was hot to me was not hot to him. And
Right.
so that was a surprise to me that, hey, even little things like this can be something that you have to work out with your roommate.
Right, it's little things. And I think a big part of learning those things is definitely voicing those things. You don't want to hold on to it until it bubbles up into something that's much worse, right? So if it's some small disagreement about the heating or cooling of the room or where things are placed or noise at night, all those things it'll benefit you in talking about them in the very beginning when you move to campus here at App State, so you can have a positive experience in our communities. And it leads to the first thing I think about is our roommate agreements, right? I think that's a perfect time to start conversations about how this room is going to operate. Are we going to have music till 10? Are we going to start setting at 8? Can I have guests over? All those things are things you should think about when living with someone, particularly on a hall on a college campus.
Well, and what I love about our roommate agreements is, they're a thick packet of good questions that maybe you don't think about early on, because we have our students do those in the first 2 weeks. And so, it's gonna ask you, how do you feel about sharing things? What time do we want lights out to be in our rooms? How do we feel about guests? And I think you made a great point earlier. I know a little bit about me. I've worked in housing professionally for 5 years, 2 years as a grad student, and then a couple years as an RA. So right around 10 years of somewhat being in housing. And typically when I get a roommate conflict, it's almost never really about the thing that they're mad about in that moment. It's a series of little things that have led to this much bigger blow up. So, I'll get students that come to me and say, oh, my roommate, won't turn the lights off when she goes to bed. And they're furious. And I think that can't be really why you're mad, right? This is a disproportionate response. And so you bring up a great point about early on, don't let these little things about your roommate sort of, get on your nerves and don't bottle those in. But on the flip side, and maybe you can talk about this, I think a lot of students come to college thinking, my roommate's going to be my best friend. We're going to eat 3 meals a day together in Race Dining Hall. We're going to hang out all weekend and watch Netflix, and we're going to be inseparable because all these movies I've watched as a kid show that your college roommate is one of your people forever. So can you talk about a little bit about you as a hall director? What have you seen different across successful roommate relationships?
Yeah, most definitely. I think that way of coming into university housing, I think having an open mind will definitely benefit you above all else. But hoping your roommate is your best friend is definitely a very positive thing. And I think there's potential for that to happen, but we can't assume necessarily that we'll start off that way. I think the best relationships between residents are ones that in the beginning they sit down, whether that's with a resident assistant there to mediate the conversation, or just in their own, and they say, what do you like? What's your kind of music? your favorite kind of food. When do you usually eat dinner? What are your study habits like? And finding out those things. And sometimes they're not going to be the same. You don't have to have every dinner together, every lunch together. You don't have to have the same group of friends or have the same interests. But you can respect those interests and be civil in your relationship. So I find that I've had residents where one person really loves to stay up super late and listen to music. Their roommate wants to go to bed around 9 p.m. So that's why we have a hall full of mini residents who can also be your friend. And maybe there's some folks in the corner who really like to be up that late as well, respectfully, of course, with music. But you can have community outside of your room and spend time with those residents so that you give your roommate a break if they're turning in a little earlier. And I think open communication about those things is super important. Never assume they know what bothers you, and never assume you know what bothers them. Sometimes, I think when I was a roommate, actually, freshman year, he is my best friend, one of my roommates in that situation. But believe it or not, we switched rooms in the middle of our freshman year because he loved to play Madden and I love to sleep.
Sure.
So
same.
if he's playing video games all night, it wasn't really working for me. But we also had a third roommate, and I think they did a little better job than I did at the time of how to mediate going about, playing these hours and not these hours, just to have the respectful sharing of that space. So communicating those things is extremely important, and finding community outside of your roommate will definitely help in that way as well.
Yeah.
I think especially on our larger halls, there's going to be groups of you that will just click. And sometimes your roommates in that group and sometimes they're not, but it can still be a fun time.
Yeah. So I think to kind of wrap up talking about roommates, we're talking about valuing communication, getting to know each other. A lot of our students fall into is using, social media, Instagram and Twitter to decide a lot of things about their roommate before they get there. And so I don't know about you, but if someone just used my Instagram and Twitter to decide everything about me, oh gosh, I don't know what they would think. So, a reminder that who we are online isn't always who we are in person. And then, lastly, when you think about your ideal roommate relationship, really coming to college, thinking about what you define as successful. For me, as someone that works in housing, as long as two students can respect each other, share a space, get along, and they don't really even have to be friends. As long as they're successfully sharing a space and people are meeting their academic and social goals, I feel great about it. So I think those are three keys to coming into college about roommates. But as you mentioned, community starts in your room but branches out into your hall. So segueing into living on a hall, what does that look like for our students?
Yeah, so of course, and you can browse University Housing's website to look specifically at floor plans and those kinds of things of how buildings are laid out. But typically, you'll be in a room either with you and a roommate in that room. There's options where you and a roommate share a bathroom in that room. And then there's our suite style rooms where it's you and a roommate, a bathroom connecting another room where there are two roommates there who are then your suite mates.
Sure.
So there's a couple combinations of how that could look for you. There's also some halls on campus with communal restrooms. So in each one of those rooms kind of has their own challenge and successes, as I would say. But it's extremely important to define what you're going to share in those rooms, not just for time, but also the physical things in those rooms. So if you're in a room that does have a bathroom in it, does that mean you are going to share everything? I think a lot of our residents come in very happy-go-lucky, and they say, my roommate, we can share anything. I'm an open book. Take it all. If you're hungry, I will feed you. If you need clothes, you can borrow my sweater.
Yeah.
But then they do that, and it doesn't always go great, right? So it's important to really talk about with your roommate, your future roommates, if you've already connected with them, what are you able to share? So if you're sharing a restroom together, does this mean we can share our towels? Or does this mean I have a towel rack and you have a towel rack? When it comes to other items such as soap, toiletries, are we sharing those things? Are we buying them separately to clean the bathroom, cleaning schedules for the restroom and the space yourself? Talking about those things before they're a problem is always going to help in the long run. it's really sucky sometimes whenever the trash isn't piling up for a week, and now we have to talk about who's going to take it out while it stinks. So if you talk about it before it happens, you usually do a little better. And then branching out to our halls with communal style restrooms. So that means you're going to have a room with you and a roommate, and you could share that restroom with potentially 20 or 30 individuals on that floor, with your own separate shower stall to use at a time, of course, and then toilet and sinks and things.
Sure.
So does that mean you're bringing a shower caddy to campus? You're taking everything with you. You can't leave things in those restrooms, but also planning out your time, understanding that we all have classes usually starting around 8 or 9 a.m. every hour on the hour. So when are you going to go in the restroom and take that time for yourself? Or knowing that it's a hot time, maybe at 7 a.m., maybe you're going to go a little early, maybe you're going to shower at night. Deciding those things, again, before you really need it will definitely help you not only get along with your hallmates or your roommate, but also your hallmates. It kind of goes into community standards as a whole. So that process will be done with the resident assistant, and you would get with your hallmates and you would decide, these are kind of the rules we're all going to agree upon for this hall. For some halls, that may be we are going to wear shoes when in the hallways. Other halls, shoes might not be necessary in the hallways. But if that's something that you want to voice, that is your time to do it in that setting so everyone can agree upon the rules, particularly for those restrooms. How are we going to deal with things if the restroom is crowded? Are we going to have time limits? Are we allowed to listen to music in the restroom? All those things you have the power to decide once you move into campus. I think one of the best parts of being a college student, particularly early on, is the amount of freedom you have.
Oh, yeah.
With that freedom comes out of responsibility. It almost feels like Peter Parker's uncle.
Yeah, a little Spider-Man moment.
Exactly, right? So with that great power of freedom, you need to be responsible in how you're going to divide it up amongst yourselves.
Yeah.
Because there's still going to be rules that you can follow together to make sure we're all successful. And it'll really create a very equitable environment. So everyone's treated fairly, everyone feels heard, and then hopefully there won't be as many concerns, if any, throughout the year.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point about class schedules. And I think about, when you're in high school, you kind of all have the same class schedule, right? Like you get to school at 8, you go to school until 3:30. That's what it is. When I was in college, I used to get my schedule set up a couple semesters where I had no class on Fridays and I wouldn't start class until the late afternoons. It was great. So, but then my roommates didn't have that schedule, right? They had 8 a.m.s or they had class on Fridays. And so I think what we see a lot with our students is learning how to be respectful of everyone on your hall, no matter what your different schedules are. Right. So I think about quiet hours a lot. Our quiet hours start at night officially, during times when most people are winding down and going to sleep. But we also have courtesy hours. Those are 24, basically meaning, if you're in your room, does your music need to be blasting? Do your video games need to be at full level? How are you being respectful to the people beside you? I think it's kind of like a pushing the golden rule we're all taught a little further. So, when you're a kid, it's treat others how you would want to be treated. I think equity on a hall is more treating others how they want to be treated, right? And you can't figure that out without building community. So whereas, you might really thrive doing homework with some background noise, other people might not. And so figuring out what does that look like to be successful. I think one of the most powerful things about working in housing, and I'm sure you can echo this, Adrian and I have been in charge of some not so glamorous buildings since we've been here. Buildings that are a little older, but lend themselves to amazing communities. And so what we've seen year after year is students, your memories aren't the structure that you lived in, it's the people that you lived with. And so these communities and that community building is what you're going to remember. You'll never remember whether or not your room was close to the bathroom or far from it, or if you had laundry on every floor in the lobby, but you will remember the great times you had with your hallmates. And I think being equitable and being respectful is what lays that foundation to build those memories.
Most definitely, most definitely. I think sometimes on the house, or when you have tours traditionally during orientation of a few of the residence halls, you may walk through and feel like, oh, this would be terrible, or
Mm-hmm.
this would be great. Well, I would venture to say that every year a hall is a little bit different,
Oh yeah.
and that greatness is based on who's filling it up. So I would encourage you all, once you get to campus, to really have an open mind about your situation, whether you're in a private room all to yourself, or whether you're on a hall sharing a restroom with 20 other individuals. The community can be really amazing if you let it. I think it leads way to hall council and student leadership opportunities where you can govern and help program in the halls and have some really exciting events.
Yeah.
Your resident assistants will be putting on programs all the time that you can get involved in. I think those are all great opportunities to really build community and build a positive community. One thing I, as a hall director, I disliked probably the most was speaking in front of my hall or sending an email about some things that were unhappy in the community.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like doing those things. My favorite moments were the times during the holiday season where we had a gingerbread house a decoration competition where the prizes were, candy and cake and all those things, or having a donut drive at 8 a.m. for our ROTC students.
Right.
All those things are things you're going to take away from this experience. So I encourage you to really try it all as much as you can, because this is definitely the place to find yourself, find what you like, find what you don't like, and find who you can like to do it with. I think you may not end up with being best friends with your freshman roommate for the rest of your life, but you can be really, really good friends, at least for a short while. And 9 times out of 10, those relationships will last at least through your time here at App, because all of you are experiencing the same things together. You're building schedules together. You're here for the first time. You're from home together. And you will really get to see just how strong you are, how resilient you are, and how well you are with dealing with people who are a little different than you. I think here at App, we have a lot of diversity, and whether that's diversity of thought, political views, race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender identity, all those things. And you will be making it up here in these residence halls. So we really want this to be a place where you can all grow and achieve things together, as different as you may be. I think you'll find a lot of commonalities more so than differences once you arrive. And sometimes that's, you're from a small town, moving in a room with someone from New Jersey who's used to taking a subway. And it's different, it's hard, it's challenging, but it can be really exciting. So I think you're at a really good place if you're watching these videos anyway, here at App State and Housing, to find more about yourself, more about equitability, and all those things here on App's campus, particularly in university housing.
Yeah. Well, that was great. I have nothing to add. I think that was a great way to wrap up our chat about living in community. I would say that if you're watching this video and you have questions about what it looks like to be in a community, if you want clarification on any of the things we talked about, please email housing@appstate.edu. We would be glad to get in touch with you and chat a little bit more. Adrian and I are so excited. We will be working together, opening up the brand new building. So if you are assigned to Raven Rocks, you will be living with Adrian and myself. We are so excited to build community in those new halls. And even if you're not in our communities, if you see us on campus, say hi. We're really excited for all of you to be Mountaineers, whether it's your first time to campus or you're coming back for your sophomore, junior, senior year. You're always family at Appalachian, and we will see you in the fall.
Yes. So glad you're coming and joining our family.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Adrian. Have a great day.
You too.